Hi, Whisper. Hey, lady. I got somebody listening. Got our stories. So sleepy. Hi, Laura Lynn. Thank you, gals, for coming to listen. I love it. Love reading. Okay. Let me find them. Hi, Kevin. Okay, Kevin, lay back and listen. Hi, Fwazia Wanwu. I love how you keep coming in here, Fwazia. You must enjoy it. Hi, Tammy. I love how you come too, Tammy. Support this old lady. This grumpy old lady. Okay, we're going to read Tommy Knockers from Placerville, California. I chuckled to myself as I climbed down into the darkness of the mine shaft, musing on the antics of the 49ers who had come rushing to California to find gold. None of them knew anything about hard rock mining. They just wanted to do a little panning, a little digging, and go home rich. Hard rock mining was a complete mystery to them. Those of us who knew it well were looked upon as miracle workers. They called us cousin Jacks. Bless you, Lex.
Thank you.
We were from Cornwall, England, and had grown up working in the tin mines. When they struck gold out in California, quite a number of us packed up everything and followed the greenhorn Yankees to the Sierra Nevada. And yes, we're back in California. Someone with sense was needed to teach all the so-called Argonauts how to do hard rock mining. We Cornishmen called that first generation of gold seekers farmers. They were good at placer mining. Any fool can learn to pan for gold and clean out a sluice box, but heaven preserve us all when they set foot into a real hard rock mine. The farmers were always letting strangers come onto their diggings, something a Cornishman would never do. That will jinx you for sure. Many a promising vein has pinched out after a stranger came to visit the diggings. I settled in Hangtown, and it didn't take long for me to build up a good reputation. The ease with which I discovered gold made the Argonauts think I could smell it a mile away. 30 years of experience in the tin mines might have helped, but I wasn't about to spoil the legend growing up around me and the other Cornish miners who condescendingly began to teach the farmers about mining. The first thing I taught the men was to watch the candles. If the candles go out, you go out too. Hi, Tracy Kloss. A candle won't burn in bad air. If your candle flickers out, you are probably on the point of asphyxiation. I also taught them to watch the rats. Rats can sense a cave-in before it happens. When the rats move out, so does the miner, is an inflexible rule in mining. If you watch the rats, you know which way to run. Also, No whistling in the mines. Sharp sounds cause vibrations, and vibrations cause cave-ins. I didn't think that about whistling. One of the farmers, a young fellow named Robert, had followed me down to the shaft that morning. He took up work in a nearby tunnel. As I was sitting in the entrance to the tunnel, in which I was working, eating my noon meal by lantern light, Robert came along with his lunch. He sat beside me and asked me why it was that we cousin Jacks were so good at finding gold. Most of us follow the sound of the Tommy knockers, I told him. What's a Tommy knocker? Robert asked. I pointed to a small clay statue that I had placed at the entrance to the tunnel. Robert picked it up and brought it back to the lantern to inspect it. It depicted a little old man with a small body, a big head, large ears, and a crooked nose. He wore a peaked hat, a leather jacket, and water-soaked leather boots. Here's an illustration of a Tommy knocker. Looks like one of those gnomes that Carolyn likes so well, doesn't it? Tommy knockers are the spirits of departed miners, I explained. They help miners find ore. They also knock on the walls of the mines right before a cave-in. When you hear a Tommy knocker knocking, it's best to depart the area right quick. They have saved the life of many a miner I know. Some folks say that the very first man to hear the sound is jinxed, but I haven't found that to be true, and I have heard them more than once. Hi, Cole. So why do you make statues of them? Asked Robert, setting the tiny man down and opening his lunch. Oh, it's important to stay on their good side. I always leave a bit of my lunch for them, and it pleases them when we fashion the little clay figures of their spirits. The Tommy knockers can be spiteful creatures if they don't like you. My friend Eddie was once a target of the Tommy knockers. They drove him crazy, pelting him with stones, stealing his tools, blowing out his lantern. Robert smirked at me and shook his head. It all sounds like nonsense to me. You've been working underground too long. I laughed. Maybe so, I said easily. Then again, maybe not. To illustrate my point, I told him the following story. Eddie couldn't figure out why the Tommy knockers had singled him out until one day he heard a voice calling to him from the dark opening of a nearby shaft. Eddie, I want my $5, the Tommy knocker said. Eddie was so startled he dropped his tools all over the ground. Okay, Kevin. The voice sounded just like that of his old friend Joe Trelawney, who had died in a cave-in a few months back. Eddie had borrowed $5 from Joe and had never returned it. Eddie went into the shaft, and sure enough, there was Joe Trelawney's ghost, shrunk to the size of a 2-foot dwarf with a big, ugly head, large ears, and a crooked nose. He wore a peaked hat, a leather jacket, and water-soaked leather boots. Eddie could see right through him. The Tommy knocker was not pleased to see Eddie. Give me back my $5, Eddie, the ghost of his old friend demanded. I don't have any money on me, Joe, Eddie said, patting his pockets for emphasis. I've heard that before, said the Tommy knocker dryly. I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now. The Tommy knocker disappeared into thin air, leaving an uneasy Eddie to wonder about what the ghost would do next. He soon found out. All day long, Eddie was plagued by the Tommy knocker. His ladder was shaken so hard that he almost fell. The loud tapping noise of an invisible drill nearly drove him mad. He just missed being buried by a rock fall. And through it all, Joe's voice would taunt him. Give me back my $5, Eddie. All right, Joe, all right, Eddie finally yelled into the mouth of the tunnel where his friend had appeared. I'll get your bloody $5. Oh, Ashley, you've been gone a long time. We've been wondering about you. Nice to see you. Carolyn will be happy to hear that you were back. Hi, Elizabeth T. Thank you for listening, coming to listen. I really appreciate you doing that. We have our own little reading nook here. Okay, let's see. Abandoning his work for the day, Eddie made the long climb to the surface and took 5 silver dollars from the money box he kept under a loose board in his bedroom. Then he climbed back down into the mine and stuck the $5 into a crack in the wall next to the place Joe's spirit had appeared to him. There's your $5, Joe, Eddie shouted, his voice echoing oddly in the dark tunnel. Just trying to get this where I can set my book on it. That's ridiculous, Robert exclaimed. He rose and dusted off his trousers. Keep your secrets then, old man, you cousin Jacks. You have some special secret to finding gold. Wait. I skipped something. Hold on. There's your $5, Joe. It's about bloody time, Joe said, appearing next to him and peering critically into the crack where the money lay. Are you going to leave me alone now? Eddie asked. The Tommy knocker grinned impishly at Eddie. Maybe, he said. He scooped up the 5 silver dollars and disappeared into the dark. I finished my story and sat back to take a bite of my meat pasty. Robert blinked a few times and then shook his head. I still think you've been working underground too long, he said. Tommy knockers have helped me find ore more than once, I said, gesturing toward the small statue at the entrance to the tunnel. That's ridiculous, Robert exclaimed. He rose and dusted off his trousers. Keep your secrets then, old man. You cousin Jacks have some special secret to finding gold, and I aim to figure it out. Robert walked away, kicking the small statue as he passed. It broke in 2 pieces, the head landing on the far side of the tunnel. I picked up the pieces once he was gone and put them back together, using some sticky mud. What fools these Yankees be, eh, Joe? I said to it as I carefully set it in a crevice at the entrance to the tunnel. I placed a large piece of my pasty beside the statue, saluted it with my pick, and went back to work. Oh, wow. Hip replacement? There was a lot of that stuff going on, Ashley. Knee replacements, shoulder replacements. reverse shoulder replacements. Yeah, lots of that in the Rambler community. A few minutes later, I heard Robert cursing loudly from inside his shaft. He'd been hit in the head with a rock. I chuckled to myself. Robert should not have kicked the statue. He had annoyed the Tommyknockers, and they were not a forgiving lot. Several times after that, Robert's lantern was snuffed out by a stray breeze. Over Robert's cursing, I thought I heard a soft laugh. Toward the end of the day, a shower of stones buried Robert's tools. He spent the rest of the day digging them out. I kept working long after Robert and the others had left for the day. I'd found a promising looking seam that I wanted to try out. It turns left about 5 yards in, a familiar voice said to me, conversationally. I glanced around. A small fellow, wearing a peaked hat, a leather jacket, and water-soaked leather boots, stood at the entrance to my tunnel. He was delicately eating the bit of pasty that I had left next to the statue. Evening, Joe, I said. How big is this seam? Smallish, the little man replied. He hopped up onto a stone ledge next to the lantern and sat swinging his legs. Sounds cute. It peters out after 100 yards. If you want to work the big gold-bearing quartz vein, you should start another tunnel down a few yards to the right, next to that outcropping, and go straight for 10 feet. That's where you'll hit one of the source veins of the mother lode. Mother lode, I asked. I kept my voice calm, but my hands were shaking. I nonchalantly laid down my pickaxe and wiped my head with a rough handkerchief I kept in my pocket. Yes, indeed. That vein is one of the biggest in these hills. Where do you think all that placer gold came from? The Tommyknocker said brightly. Well, I'm off. Thanks for the pasty, Eddie. Thanks for the advice, Joe, I replied. The little man paused at the entrance to the tunnel. Shaft number 3 is going to cave in tomorrow, he said. You might want to warn the others before we do. I will, I said. The Tommyknocker nodded and disappeared into the darkness. I sat down shakily. Joe never steered me wrong about ore, but he'd never pointed me to the mother lode before. Maybe he liked hearing me tell his story to a Yankee. I went over to the place my old friend had pointed. Oh, that scared me. I dropped my little apple thing off the book. That paperweight, I dropped that off. Fell off. I went over to the place my old friend had pointed out to me and started digging. That night, I told several of the cousin Jacks about a potential cave-in shaft 3. They nodded solemnly when I alluded to the Tommyknockers. They'd been hearing some faint rapping all day long. The next morning, we warned everyone working in the mine to stay away from the shaft, since it could go any time. A few men laughed off the warning, Robert among them, and entered the shaft. We dug out their bodies as best we could after the shaft collapsed. I found Robert buried from the waist down in rubble. He would never walk again. Later that day, I took a special meal down to the new tunnel and left it for old Joe Trelawney, the Tommyknocker. I had hit the mother lode of gold-bearing quartz right where the little man had said it would be. The statue I've made of him still sits in a niche I carved out for it. It always pays to stay on the good side of the Tommyknockers. Okay, let me find another one. It's hard to find which ones I've, Okay, we read the one about the granddaddy. Hi, Mary. Remember, we read the one about the old granddaddy that was 200 years old? It was crazy. Okay, let's see what this one is. The Evil Eye, Monterey. I'm not sure if we read this. Let's see. I think I've been marking them if we read them. I just started doing that, though. Bless you, Lex.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, The Evil Eye. I had a good job in those days, working as an attaché for Commandant Salvatierra. I'm not going to even pronounce the first name. At the time these events took place, it was the rainy season in the year of our Lord, 1797. I was still new in my position, but I was quickly learning my post. The commandant was a good master. He treated his soldiers and his servants like an indulgent parent. Commandant Salvatierra was both an intelligent man and a wise one, a combination that is not often found in one person. His appearance was marred by the fact that he was missing one eye. Tracy said, "Bless you, Lex." She said, "Thank you." And he was missing one eye, which had been shot out by an arrow in battle. The loss had not hampered him in any way, although knowing him to be a proud man, I suspected that he disliked appearing in public with only one eye. One day, the commandant told me that he was expecting someone from Salem to arrive with a package for him. When he came, I was to usher him directly to the commandant without question. I kept watch for this man and was deeply immersed in my paperwork when Captain Peleg Scudder of Salem was brought into my office. He was a jolly, round fellow with an engaging manner. I quite liked Americans. I did not see many, for the law forbade any extended stay of American ships in Spanish waters. I know, Ashley. We exchanged greetings, and I ushered the roly-poly captain into the commandant's study, where the commandant greeted him like a long-lost brother. He was offering the man a drink when I quietly made my exit. From time to time, I heard laughter and song coming from the inner sanctum. Finally, the commandant and the captain emerged and parted ways with sadness. I wonder what it was the captain had brought for the commandant, for I had seen no package in his hand, nor did he have room on his person to carry more than a small item. It wasn't until the next morning that I found out. The following day was Sunday. I was sitting in the pew with my lovely wife, Maria, when the commandant entered the church and took his place. The congregation murmured in astonishment at the sight of him, for he was now in possession of two eyes instead of one. So what was the American captain? So what was it that the American captain had brought him, I mused. The priest hurried to the commandant, exclaiming over the miracle that had been granted to the fortunate man. I chuckled to myself, realizing that the priest and the local residents all thought that his new eye was real. No one in either the Presidio or the mission had ever heard of a glass eye. During the next few days, I heard stories circulating about the commandant's new eye. The priests were using the miraculous appearance of his right eye as an example of the effect of good works and prayer. It made quite an impression on everyone. At first, people went out of their way to speak to the commandant and marvel at his new eye. Then I noticed a change. The soldiers manning the presidio were not used to looking into a false eye. The glass eye had a cold, stern appearance that did not match the warmth of the commandant's real eye. It made people nervous. After a harrowing interview with the commandant, I heard the town drunk tell his neighbors, "The commandant's new eye, it seemed to see into my soul. It called forth grave confessions of sins that I've not even told to my priest. Truly, it is an evil eye." It did not take long for his words to circulate to every home in the Presidio. It was rumored that the new eye had been given to the commandant by the devil, and many became afraid to speak to him. Even his friends started avoiding him. Those soldiers whose business took them into his presence treated him with suspicion and would speak only those words necessary to complete their transactions. Even my Maria believed the stories. I told her that it was a fake eye made out of glass and brought to the commandant from America. To the commandant from America. Maria said she did not care if it was made out of diamonds. It was an evil eye, and no good would come to me while I worked under its baleful stare. Salvatierra was upset by the change he sensed in the people of the Presidio, although he did not know its cause. He began withdrawing from society. Slowly, his easygoing, indulgent manner changed. In his official dealings, he became harsh and exacting. In his personal life, he acted like a spoiled, ill-tempered child. Several times, I broached the topic of his new eye, trying to tell him that it made people nervous, but he would not listen to me. Let's see. Oh, here's illustration of the evil eye. Yes, last day of March. One of the old men who attended the local mission, a man called Nico, was especially terrified by the commandant's evil eye. Nico had been a special favorite of the commandant and had taken the change in his personality very much to heart. I didn't realize it at the time, but Nico was determined to save the commandant from the evil eye that the devil had bestowed upon him. He decided that he would poke out the commandant's right eye and thus restore him to his former state of grace. One night, while I was working late on some papers that were due to sail out on a ship the next day, Nico crept into the commandant's garden and made his way to the bedroom window. Nico slipped over the windowsill and stood looking down at the commandant, who was asleep in his bed. Suddenly, he gave a howl of terror. The commandant's real eye was closed in slumber, but his right eye was wide open and it glared at him in the light of the full moon. When I heard Nico scream, I ran out of the office and down the hall to the commandant's bedchamber. Commandant Salvatierra, awakened by the noise, had grabbed his sword and was flailing wildly at Nico. The old man managed to land a punch in the commandant's right eye before I could stop him. I made a grab for Nico and finally managed to subdue him. I took away the sword from the half-asleep commandant before he could accidentally decapitate me. I could see that his right eye was cracked by the blow from Nico's fist. Then I lit a candle and turned to glare at Nico, who was huddled in terror on the floor. "What in the world is going on?" I shouted at Nico. He pointed a shaking hand at the commandant's ruined right eye. I have destroyed the evil eye, he said to me. The commandant is saved. Commandant Salvatierra fingered his ruined glass eye ruefully. You think this is an evil eye, Nico? He asked. The eye is darkened now and will do evil no more, the old man said solemnly. No wonder everyone's been avoiding me, Commandant Salvatierra said to me. You were right about this eye, my boy. I picked Nico up off the floor and frog marched him out of the house and down the road to the mission, scolding him all the way for punching the commandant and ruining his glass eye. I don't think he was listening to me. He had the beatific look of a hero who has accomplished his mission against great odds. I turned him over to the priest, who gave him a tongue lashing for his behavior. But I could tell that the priest was secretly relieved to hear that the evil eye had been destroyed. There was great rejoicing in the Presidio when people saw the commandant's cracked and darkened right eye. The evil eye was gone, and the people started trusting him again. The commandant's kind and gentle manner returned. Once again, he acted like an indulgent parent toward all. He wore the broken glass eye for the rest of his life, and he never told anyone that the eye they had all feared was just a trinket that a sea captain had brought him from America. America. Get a drink. Now sit back and chill. I got to find another one, okay? I don't want to read about Bigfoot. Sorry, I don't. I think we read about a Bigfoot anyway in one of these books. Just a minute, guys. I'll find one that we haven't heard. I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm going to use my inhaler. That's why I shut this off. Okay, just chill. I get nervous because I see I have over 1,000 people here, and I hate to keep 1,000 people waiting. Hi, Captain Lee. Only 364 days till your next birthday, Captain. Yeah, whisper to me, don't laugh about that. It actually means that there's 1,100 people in here. That's what that 11 is. Mm-hmm. Sure is. Come on, people. Don't be shy. Come on in. Come on in. Gonna have some good stories tonight. Let's see. The Rescuer, I think we read this one. Maybe not, though. Yeah, I think we might not have read this one. I think we'll find out. Oh, we got 1,300 in here now. Welcome, welcome. Please just type in the chat if you don't mind where you're from. Captain Lee, that's 1,300, 1,400. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're safe here, you're loved here, and we love to scare you. We got Canada, we got North Carolina. Captain. Oh, here, let me turn the camera back on. Okay. Oh, we got 1,500. The Rescuer, Upper Peninsula. Now we're in Michigan. Oh, wait, you know what, you guys? I wanted to check this out. I think this one's actually signed by the author. California, Northern California, Petaluma. Okay, I know I saw this earlier today. Okay, which book was it? I'm pretty sure it had the author's signature in ink. And I thought, well, really? I never noticed that. Well, where in the heck? I know I saw it. Oh, it might have been one of those other books that I've already read. It must have been. Okay. My buddies and I, my name is Grant, take an annual hunting trip to the Upper Peninsula once a year. We haven't missed a year since our teens, and we don't intend to. Jean, Jake, and I take great pride in our ability to stalk game through woods and swamps and meadows. We had become skilled trackers in the process, and it never bothered anyone if one of us lagged behind because we knew he could quickly catch up. But to be safe, we had a strict policy in place. If one of us remained missing for more than a half hour, the others would backtrack until they found him, just in case something unexpected happened. I was the one most guilty of lagging behind. I was a closet naturalist and took more delight in examining the flora than in hunting the fauna. Hi, Janice Renee and Laura Lynn. Illinois, Northern California, Ohio, New Hampshire. Back down to 1,300, and that's okay. I appreciate that you would come in here at least and checked it out, whether you liked it or not. Thank you for giving it a chance. Our most recent trip was in midsummer. On the last day, we woke up to a gloriously sunny, warm morning. We left the camp early as Jean and Jake were intent on going home with something large and 4-footed if it meant creating the creature out of sticks and swamp grass. Denise. Heart made wise. I walked at a slower pace than the others, letting them pull ahead while I leisurely enjoyed the woods and the glimpses I caught of birds and little creatures going about their business. When I reached a swampy area, I slowed down even more, taking great care as I picked my way through the grass and the marshy spots. All at once, I glimpsed a mammoth-sized turtle out toward the center of the wetland. I moved forward to get a better look, and that's when I got myself in trouble. I leapt lightly onto what I supposed to be a dry patch of mud, but I found out quickly that there was nothing dry about it. In no time flat, I was up to my armpits in mud and sinking. I flung both arms out instinctively to help keep my head above the surface, and I felt my rifle slide out of my grasp. It disappeared with a plopping sound to Lord knows where beneath the slime. Ashley. Oh, like quicksand, right? If any of you guys ever watched the old movies where people would fall in quicksand and stuff, and it looked so horrible and scary, I've always been afraid of that happening. And there's a way you're supposed. I saw a show once where they told you what to do if you get stuck in that. And I can't remember if you were supposed to not wiggle, because if you wiggled, you'd go down more. Or if you just stayed still, you wouldn't sink. Yes. Yes, the heart made wise. Yes. And I can't remember what you're supposed to do. I gave a loud shout for help, hoping Jean and Jake weren't too far ahead to hear me. The effort pushed me farther down into the mud, and my arms started sinking along with the rest of me. I had no idea how deep this mud was, but I figured if I kept on sinking, I was a goner. Oh, really, Ashley? I shouted again, not quite so enthusiastically, and felt myself slip down another few inches. I decided to remain very calm and still. I was stuck fast, and there was nothing solid within reach. My only hope was that the mud did not go deep enough to cover my face. I strained my ears hopefully, listening for answering shouts from my friends and the sound of running feet. But not a sound reached my ears, save for the whistles and chirps of birds happily flitting through the forest. My heart was pounding ferociously as I slowly continued to sink into the thick, vile-smelling mud of the swamp. Before long, only my shoulders, neck, and head remained above the muck. I yelled again, my voice shrill with fear, and I felt myself sink a little farther once again. Through my mind flashed the face of my pretty young wife, pregnant with our first child. It was going to be a boy, and we'd been so happy painting his room and buying baby furniture the weekend before my trip. Only a week ago, but suddenly it felt like a lifetime. What would happen to Sarah and my boy if I died? Suddenly, the overwhelming smell of rotten garbage filled the air, piercing through the stink of the mud. I heard the soft thud of footsteps and looked up, my heart pounding with hope. A huge, shaggy figure emerged from the trees beside the quagmire and stopped to peer down at me. It looked sort of like an ape. Oh, I guess it is going to be something like a Bigfoot. With a hairy body, long arms, and a flat brown face. Its eyes were round and dark, its ears small, and its nose flat. It had big hands and even bigger feet. Undoubtedly, it was a Yeti. I've heard of these creatures all my life. They're the Bigfoot of the North Country, but I had never believed they really existed until now. The Yeti took in my predicament at a single glance. It turned its huge body and snapped off a long, sturdy branch from a nearby tree. A moment later, the leafy end landed beside my face in the mud, and I gasped with relief and struggled desperately against the suck of the mud to free a hand. My right arm came loose with an ugly slurping sound, and I grasped the proffered branch. In another moment, my left hand was out, and I was clinging to the branch for dear life. As I sank so low, my chin was nearly covered with mud. Here's the illustration of the rescuer. I kept my mouth firmly sealed, breathing hard through my nose as the Yeti started pulling back on the branch, hand over massive hand. It was a fierce struggle. The mud didn't want to let me go. A couple of times I screamed in pain, feeling as if I were being ripped in half by opposing forces. The Yeti seemed to understand the problem because he slowed down and began to ease the branch forward, just a little at a time. Inch by slow inch, I emerged from the mire until suddenly the mud released me with a sharp, watery popping sound. I flew the last few feet and fell on top of my rescuer, who had toppled to the ground when the pressure of the mud released so suddenly. For a timeless moment, I stared into the brown face and dark eyes of the Yeti, my nose taking in the musty, sour smell of its fur. My 6-foot frame seemed childlike compared to his, and I was suddenly reminded of my huge father, who gave me bear hugs every night when I was a toddler. Then the strangeness of the encounter and the thousands of differences that separated our two species intruded, and we rolled away from each other, springing to our feet several yards apart. Thank you, I gasped. To my astonishment, the creature nodded in acknowledgement. I wondered if it understood English. My whole body was trembling with stress and adrenaline. I wanted to flee from this strange being, and yet I wanted the moment to go on forever. But just as suddenly as it appeared, the Yeti retreated into the woods, leaving me shivering and shaking on solid ground. It was then that I heard my friends shouting my name. The half-hour apart rule had been exceeded, and they had come looking for me, just a smidgen too late, to pull me out of the mud. If the Yeti hadn't happened by, there would have been nothing left of me for them to find. Moments later, Jean and Jake were exclaiming in horror at my muddy appearance and bare feet. My boots were lost forever in the swamp mud, along with my rifle. But I didn't care. I was blessedly alive, and that's all that mattered. I was burning to tell them about the Yeti, but I was afraid they would laugh. Instead, I told them I had pulled myself out of the mud by tugging on the low-lying branches of a nearby tree. My friends were too agitated to notice that there was no tree within reach of the churned-up area where I had lain. Soon, there would be nothing for them to see, no way for them to tell where I had fallen into the mud. The swampy spot was rapidly returning to its normal, pristine state, having already swallowed half of the Yeti's tree branch. I shuddered, reminded of how narrow my escape had been. I winced my way back to camp in my bare, muddy feet, thankful for each stubbed toe and scraped ankle, each a welcome reminder that I was alive. After cleaning myself off and having a hot meal, I felt much better. I still didn't tell my friends about the Yeti, though I rather thought that I would tell my wife. Sarah was also a closet naturalist, and she would have no trouble believing my story. I got up before sunrise the next morning, the day we were to leave, and hiked back to the spot where I had almost perished. Removing my gold class ring, I placed it on a large rock, thinking that it might fit the smallest finger on the Yeti's hand. I looked around in the glowing daylight but saw nothing. Still, I called out, "Please take this gift with my thanks." I was partway down the trail when some instinct made me look back over my shoulder. I saw the Yeti standing beside the rock, gazing at the ring, which gleamed in the rays of the rising sun. It reached out a huge hand and picked up the glittering gold object just as the sun came blazing over the horizon. I blinked my eyes against the sudden glare. When my sight cleared, the Yeti was gone. I smiled to myself and walked back the way I had come, toward camp, the road, and home. Oh, thank you, Kristen, for coming and listening and relaxing. Hello, Vicki. Thank you for coming. Give me a chance to find another one that we haven't read yet, okay? Read so many of these now, it's getting hard to find one that we haven't read or that I thought was too boring to read. Sometimes the ones you think are going to be super boring, they end up turning out to be kind of good. So, okay, let's, I guess, check out this one. The Nain Rouge, Nain. Hi, Kathy Greener. Yeah, the Yeti was nice, wasn't it? Wasn't he? 20 million. Okay, Tracy. I appreciate all you guys coming to listen. Makes me feel really important. YouTube's going to be putting me all over their platforms. I'm going to be the new sensation. This is from Detroit, Michigan. I don't know a name. Nain, the Nain Rouge. Pierre sat beside the rain-streaked window, staring out into the darkness. It was a dark and stormy night. A night suited perfectly for this death watch, he thought gloomily. Naturally. His sister, Josette, had a knack for arranging everything in the most suitable manner, from what she wore to the appropriate weather. It was a trait that drove him crazy, especially when she tried to arrange his life. Pierre had long ago come to grips with the fact that he was a harum-scarum kind of person, the sort who changed his mind on the slightest whim. His flightiness hadn't helped him hold a job, but it had given him an exciting life. Good, Elizabeth. I'm glad you do love it. Now Josette lay dying in her bed, dressed in a perfectly pressed nightgown adorned with lace and ruffles. A blue nightcap framed her tightly curled white hair, and she held a Bible in her hand. Outside, thunder rumbled, lightning flashed, and rain pounded in a suitably grim and foreboding manner. Pierre sighed a little, and Josette called to him from the bed. "Stop sighing like a ninny," she said. "Straighten up and act sensibly for once in your life, Pierre, and come over here where I can see you. You're the only relation I have left in the world, and you should be at my side when my time comes." Pierre bit back a sharp retort, something he would not have done if Josette hadn't been on her deathbed, and went to his sister's side. He hated it when she ordered him around. From the day he was born, Josette had been trying to make him as perfect as she was, and she still had not succeeded. This annoyed her greatly and was probably the reason she was being so stubborn about the mill. As he took her thin, cold hand in his, Pierre almost forgave her for the long debates they'd had lately over the running of the mill. Almost a year ago, he had come home penniless from the West, having sunk everything he owned into a gold mine that went bust. At that time, he had told his sister that he was tired of adventuring and was going to settle down and work in the family mill. His sister was not happy with the arrangement, but she could say little about it since their parents had left them equal shares in the business. Pierre had worked hard during the next few months, learning the business from top to bottom, and he earned the respect of Henry Smith, the supervisor his sister had hired to run the mill after her husband's death. Let me get a sip here real quick. Hi, Meg. I might read one more after this, Meg. Good, Vicky. I'm glad. That's what this is for, just to be nice and calming. When the doctor told his sister that she had only a few months to live, Pierre had asked her if she would leave her half of the mill to him. Josette had promptly told him no. Her half of the mill was going to Henry Smith, the current supervisor, whom she had handpicked for the job and who was twice the man that her brother could ever be. Wow, that's not very nice. And from that position, she would not budge, no matter how they argued. Pierre, you are wool gathering, Josette snapped weakly, frowning at him from her pillow. Honestly, can't you behave in a respectable manner just this once? You should be comforting me in my final hours. It's a good thing I didn't leave you half of the mill, my half of the mill. You'd bankrupt the whole operation in under a year. Pierre was indignant. Henry Smith had commended his work to Josette time and time again, but she never believed the supervisor's reports. That's not fair, Josette, he said as calmly as he could. I have worked hard to learn the business ever since I got home, and I am quite competent. I would keep the mill profitable, and I would keep Henry Smith as supervisor, just the way you want it. Mother and father wanted the mill to remain in the family. Mother and father would have been terribly disappointed in you if they'd lived, Josette snapped, just as I have been. I'd rather leave the mill to the devil than to you. As the words left her mouth, a bolt of lightning flashed down from the clouds and crashed into a tree near the house with a loud boom and a burst of electricity that made Pierre's hair stand on end. He leapt to his feet and ran to the window, his eyes still tingling from the bright glare. As he reached the window, he heard a rat-a-tat-tat sound, and suddenly a grotesque face appeared on the other side of the glass. A shambling, red-skinned creature leered at him. It had horribly decaying teeth, a twisted nose, and cold, glittering eyes. Behind its head, Pierre could see the old oak tree smoldering in the lashing rain, part of its trunk sheared clean off by the lightning bolt. Here's the, however you pronounce it, the Nain Rouge or whatever. However you pronounce that. Hi, Jen Grill. The strange red gremlin made a rude gesture with his hand and dropped away from the window. In the next flash of lightning, Pierre saw the red dwarf turning cartwheels along the walkway. For a moment, he lost sight of it in the darkness between the lightning flashes. Then he spotted the creature one more time, standing by the fence. It hopped up and down delightedly, gesturing first toward Pierre, then toward the south. It laughed at him and rubbed its hands with glee. Finally, it made another foul gesture and then disappeared into the rain-lashed lane, heading south. Pierre stared in the darkness in shock, realizing that he had just seen the infamous Nain Rouge of Detroit. The red dwarf was called the Demon of the Street, and its appearance was said to herald disaster. Cadillac, founder of Detroit, had been the first to encounter the Nain Rouge. While Cadillac was sitting on the bank of the Detroit River, the red dwarf had jumped out of a tree, landing right in front of the French colonel governor, startling him nearly out of his wits. The twisted creature had brandished a long stick as if it were a sword. It gave the governor several painful whacks before the startled man recovered enough to draw his own sword and parry the attack. He managed to beat the creature back with the flat of his blade. Finally, the red dwarf broke off its mock attack and ran away, cackling madly to itself all the while. Cadillac thought no more of the strange encounter until other things started to go wrong. Bad luck plagued him at every turn, and all of his schemes seemed to go awry. He managed to upset the Montreal traders, turn the Jesuits against him, and anger the governor of New France. Eventually, he was recalled to France, losing his trade monopoly and all of his privileges. Ever afterward, he blamed his failure in the New World on the Nain Rouge. But this was just the first of many disasters attributed to the satanic imp. Pierre recalled the story of Blood Run, a battle between the British soldiers holding Fort Detroit and Pontiac's group of rebel Native American tribes. After the United Tribes had attacked a number of settlements and laid siege to Fort Detroit, the British attempted to end the siege with a sneak attack on Pontiac's encampment, but the plan was revealed to the rebel leader, and Pontiac defeated the British in the Battle of Blood Run, which took place at a creek 2 miles north of the fort. Several survivors of the battle claimed to have seen the red dwarf running along the shores of the lake shortly before the battle began. The imp was spotted once again in 1805, racing through the streets of Detroit just before the city burned to the ground, and during the War of 1812, when the forces of British General Brock began bombarding the American forces within Fort Detroit. The American general acceded to a demand for unconditional surrender after he saw the Nain Rouge leering at him through the fog. And now Pierre himself had seen the creature just after Josette had made her pronouncement about leaving the mill to the devil. Pierre's heart almost stopped when he realized that the Nain Rouge had headed south when he left their house, straight toward the family mill. Hi, Tina Bana. From the bed, Josette was loudly demanding to know why Pierre had left her side. I'd be saying, because you're a bee. Even if you are dying, you're a dying bee. She gasped and clutched her heart dramatically. Pierre strained his eyes southward, trying to see where the imp had gone. But he could make out nothing except the whipping wind, the pouring rain, and the occasional flash of lightning. Josette called to him again, and Pierre pushed aside his fears and hurried over to the bed. He took Josette's hand, determined not to burden his sister with his worries in her last hours. He had always been a good brother to Josette, ignoring her disapproving attitude as best he could. and so he said nothing further about the mill. Instead, he talked about the happy childhood memories they shared, about what a good wife Josette had been, and other cheerful topics. Josette's final hours were spent in peace, with accord between the two siblings. Pierre even wept a little when she passed, although he knew she was ready to join her husband in the hereafter. After leaving his sister's body to the care of the undertaker, Pierre hurried back to his house in the early morning drizzle, worrying about the strange appearance of the Nain Rouge. It obviously had not come to claim Josette herself, for a more pious woman had never lived. No, its appearance must have something to do with the mill. Suddenly, Pierre realized that he could smell smoke in the air. Something big was burning, and had been for quite a while. He raced to his small stable, saddled his horse, and rode as fast as he could toward the mill. He slowed his horse when he reached the top of the hill and looked down upon the blackened ruins that had once been the family mill. Oh no. Thank you, Meg. That's so sweet. Thank you so much. Love you too. It's really sweet of you to say. It was obviously far too late to do anything about the fire. The flames were out, though some parts of the building were still smoking, and the firefighters were watching the hot spots. Henry Smith, who lived next door to the mill, had managed to save only a few pieces of equipment before the fire consumed the building. When Harry saw Pierre ride into the mill yard, he came to speak to him. It was the strangest thing you ever saw, the supervisor said, mopping his face with a blackened handkerchief. The storm had already passed through this area when a bolt of lightning came out of nowhere and struck the mill early this morning. I was walking out to my barn to milk our cow and saw the whole thing. By the by the time he had given the alarm and run to the mill, Henry said, the fire was already out of control. The supervisor gazed at the scene of destruction sadly, and then inquired after Josette. Pierre told him that his sister had died in the night, and the supervisor nodded sadly. I'm glad she passed before this happened, he said. It would have broken her heart to know that all her hard work had gone up in flames. The supervisor excused himself and walked over to a knot of men who were checking to make sure the fire was completely out. He began giving instructions for clearing away the debris and moving the saved items into his barn until they could decide what to do with them. Peter turned his horse around and started back toward home. As his horse stepped onto the bridge spanning the mill stream, his eye was caught by movement near the water. To his dismay, he saw the red dwarf tugging on the fire-blackened mill wheel as if it were trying to get it started. The creature looked over toward Pierre and gave him a foul, drooling grin and a cocky wave. Then it danced away down the bank of the stream, turning cartwheels and cackling to itself. After the destruction of the mill and two sightings of the ill-omened Nain Rouge, Pierre figured he didn't stand a chance of making a living in Detroit. Right after his sister's funeral, he sold his house, took the money he'd earned working in the mill, and headed out back west. I'll read one more, and then that will do it. Let's see what I can find. Mm, the Lou Guru that Foxybot talks about. We already read one story about this. See if I can find it something different. Let's see. Just a minute, guys. Yeah, we read The One Last Head. That one was creepy. The Phantom Trespasser. That one was really creepy, I thought. Gross Train. Yep, we read that. What about The Merchant? That one doesn't look that good. Staircase was really good, I thought. The Talking Head. Oh, yeah. That was the woman that would nag, talk. Green Lantern. Father's Revenge. That one was good. I think we read all these in Spooky Michigan. Let me see. Give me a chance. Don't leave. Phantom Coach. Ghost Baby. Shell Mound. Yeah, The Wedding. Diamond Ring. Old Red Eye. Oh my goodness, guys. Flight 401, In the Elevator, Skyway. I don't think I read The Antique Car. Okay, The Antique Car. Oh, we lost one person. Come back. I'm going to read. I got one more left. You got to hear it. Oh, wait. Oh, no. I think I did read this one. I'm going to read it. Maybe some of you didn't hear it. Isla Mirada, the Florida. We went there on vacation. It's beautiful. I was up before dawn, pulling on my outdoor gear and grabbing my fishing poles out of the garage. I tiptoed so as not to wake the missus, who had made it clear when we moved to Isla Mirada that retirement for her meant sleeping in every morning. Do you guys remember this one? When I asked her why she'd married a fisherman then, she threw a sofa pillow at me and laughed. You're still here, Captain? Yeah, I'm not going to read this one. We did read it. Forget it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to read the same one again. That's cheating. That's not fair. I don't want to do that. Okay. I think New Jersey is probably one. We still have a few left. Here's something called the Miller and the Topialets from Newark, New Jersey. The townsfolk said the previous Miller, and this will be the last one, especially since I'm running out of stuff to read. I have to get some more. The townsfolk said the previous Miller had been lured into the mill pond by a Topialets, but I figured it was just superstitious nonsense and purchased the mill in spite of the rumors. According to town records, the miller had committed suicide, and as far as I was concerned, that was the truth of the matter. A Topiolet is the spirit of a drowned human that delights in luring other people to a watery death. Ooh. These creatures not only suck people into swamps and lakes, the locals say, but also kill animals standing near still waters. This is a lot of hokum, in my opinion. No intelligent man would ever believe a Topiolet. I got the mill back up and running in no time. Soon business was booming, and I found myself a plump wife and a nice set of friends. My wife and I were expecting, and I was looking forward to becoming a father for the first time. Every now and then, someone would visit the mill and tell me a story about a Topiolet coming after this person or that, but I just laughed it off. The townsfolk were worried because I lived and worked so close to the water, but I assured them that no water spirit had ever called to me. Shortly after the last set of Topialets stories ran through our community, my nephew came to stay with my wife and me while his parents traveled in Europe. He was a sturdy little chap, and he kept my wife hopping. He was always climbing trees and then falling out of them, running down the road to play with the neighbors' children, and asking question after question after question. My wife, God love her, took it all in stride. It was good practice, she told me one night. Our baby would be just as precocious when he or she grew to be our nephew's age. Sometimes my wife brought my nephew down to the mill where he would help, quote unquote, me with work. Other days they arrived at dusk to walk home with me over the bridge and up the road to the large fancy home I had bought for my pretty wife. It was a little too big for just we two, but the baby would soon fix that. One evening at dusk, I was tidying up the mill in preparation for closing when I heard a terrible scream from outside. I dropped everything and ran for the door. reaching it just as my wife and nephew burst into the mill. My wife was wet to her knees and hysterical. My nephew was almost soaked to his neck, and he too was pale and trembling. I caught both of them close to me, my heart pounding in fear, and asked them what was wrong. Sobbing, my wife stammered out the story. They had been coming down the hill toward the bridge when a voice rang out from near the mill pond. Such a lovely voice, singing a song that they'd never heard. Entranced, my wife left the road and walked toward the water with my puzzled nephew close on her heels. A misty figure was rising from the depths of the pond, singing softly to itself and beckoning to my wife. As she drew close to the edge, the figure became clearer. It looked and sounded like an angel. Suddenly it stopped singing and stared intently at my wife's very round belly. Then it looked at my nephew, who was crying with fear at my wife's strange behavior and trying to draw her out of the water. The creature gave a snarl of rage and disappeared abruptly beneath the water, breaking the spell on my wife. My wife snapped out of her trance and discovered that she was knee-deep in the mill pond. A few more steps would have plunged her into the deep hole near the center, my nephew with her. Because neither of them knew how to swim, they would surely have drowned. It was at that moment that my wife had screamed and ran from the water, clutching my nephew to her chest. I was stunned and speechless. I did not believe in water spirits, but my wife was a truthful woman, and I had no other explanation for what had happened to her. I hurried my wife and nephew home and drew a hot bath for each of them. Once they were warm and comfortable, I made them some dinner and then put them both to bed. I made my wife promise that she would not go near the mill pond again at dusk, a promise she readily made. When both my wife and my nephew were asleep, I crossed the street to talk to my neighbor, who was the first person to tell me about the Topialets. Topialets. He listened soberly to my story and then explained that water spirits are afraid of children and pregnant women because the innocence of youths and unborn babes saves them from the siren-like Topialets song. God gave children a special protection against the forces of evil, a defense that older and wiser adults do not have. That is why the Topialets had broken off its song and released my wife from its coils. Here's the illustration. See her there in the water? My wife and nephew had been very lucky, the neighbor told me, but I should take extra precautions from then on. Now that the Topialets had awakened, it would be looking for another victim. I could not laugh off his warning this time. My neighbor advised me to carry a cross or some other holy object at all times, and if a Topialet ever came near me, to show that object to the creature and bid it go away in the name of God. The very next day, I purchased 3 crosses. I hung one around my wife's neck and one around my nephew's, giving strict instructions regarding their use should the Topialet reappear. The 3rd cross I kept in my pocket, just in case. Nearly a month passed without incident. I began to relax again, hoping the Topialet had gone back to sleep. The baby was due in a few weeks, and I was putting in a lot of overtime at the mill to square away most of my accounts. One evening, around midnight, I was in my office, finishing up the last of the paperwork, when the door behind me blew open with a bang. I dropped my pen, startled by the noise as a blast of cold and clammy air whirled about the room. I could hear footsteps coming up the stairs. I turned in my chair and saw a misty shape standing in the doorway. It twisted and undulated strangely, as if it were made of water, and seaweed swirled about its head like green strands of hair. The figure beckoned to me. Beautiful, enticing music echoed in the room, and it seemed that I had to follow the melody where it led. I half rose from my chair, but some vestige of sense sent me groping in my pocket for the cross. I pulled it out and held it toward the watery figure. The creature became still, and the music faded to a whisper. In the name of God, I bid you to go away. Never bother myself or my family again, I gasped. The Topalek turned in silence and undulated down the stairs and out of the mill. The cold and clammy air went with it, leaving me shaking but alive. My clothes were soaking wet, and small puddles of water that looked strangely like footprints led down from my office, through the mill, and out to the pond. When I got home that night, my wife screamed at the sight of me. I looked in the mirror in the front hall and saw that my dark hair had turned snow white. She demanded an explanation, and I reluctantly told her about my confrontation with the Topalek. The agitation caused by my story brought on labor pains, and my son was born a few hours later. From that day forward, my wife, nephew, son, and I always carried crosses to guard us against the water spirits. We never saw a Topalek again. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, guys, everyone, for coming. Got a big full house tonight. We had 2,800 people. Now we have 2,600. Okay, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. See you next time. See ya.